Breakdown of the 12th step of Alcoholics Anonymous. Charity. Having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, we tried to carry this message to alcoholics and to practice these principles in all our affairs. The key word in this step is action. We have seen the previous 11 steps, and it is time to give back the gift that has been given to us selflessly, to detach ourselves from others in order to carry the message to those who are still suffering, whether from their drinking, drug use, or their way of acting and living. The consequence of practicing the 11 steps is a spiritual awakening, which is different from a spiritual experience. A spiritual experience can happen at any time. Some call it a manifestation of God, and there are thousands of such experiences that alcoholics have shared with us, like when Bill W.'s room in that hospital lit up. But a spiritual awakening can only be obtained through practicing the steps. There are countless definitions of spiritual awakening, but we will use the following. The person can now do, feel, and believe what they could not do before with their own resources and without help. In other words, when a person experiences spiritual awakening, they begin to change their judgments and attitudes in their daily life. They begin to develop tolerance and love for their neighbor and themselves, something they never thought they would have in their life. Their new state of consciousness leads them to make decisions that benefit not only themselves, but also those around them. We began with the first step, which taught us the paradox that by surrendering to our powerlessness and accepting the serious and devastating consequences of our alcoholism or drug addiction, we could free ourselves from this terrible obsession. In the second step, we realized that sound judgment could only be obtained from God, but it made us analyze what kind of God we truly conceived of, since we confused trust with challenge. The third step was our first approach to God, where He spoke to us about human dependencies and how harmful they have been to each of us. And that dependence on God is the only thing that will not fail us. For this reason, it will be very beneficial to place our lives and will in His care. In the fourth step, He spoke to us about a meticulous inventory of our own lives, in which we would see our lives in stark relief and make the most of it to realize how, when, and where our instincts became unhinged. Therein lies the reason why we have drunk in such a destructive way. In the fifth step, we realize the importance of confession of our defects before another person, God, and ourselves. This step gave us a more realistic view of things. Step 6 then spoke to us about the character defects that afflict human beings: pride, lust, anger, greed, envy, gluttony, and sloth. In Step 7, we had to humbly examine these defects and recognize that they had caused us serious harm due to our demands. In Step 8, we continued working on making a list of those people we had harmed so that, consequently, in the 9th step, we would know how and in what way we would repair the damages corresponding to each person without causing harm to third parties. The 10th step spoke about the importance of taking inventory as a lifelong task, because when we made mistakes, we realized we had to correct them. Otherwise, we would constantly experience dry drunkenness, where even though we weren't drinking, we were acting as if we were. In the 11th step, we learned what it truly means to have conscious contact with God through prayer and meditation. We learned how to pray and how to begin meditating on all our affairs. We realize that practicing all these steps has given us peace and tranquility in our spirits, and that we can apply them to all aspects of our lives to begin experiencing what is commonly called within the group the honey of AA. Today, we give without expecting or receiving anything in return from our sick brother or sister. This paradox is how many of us have lived and experienced helping our brothers and sisters who are still suffering from their drinking or drug use. We must begin to give what was given to us selflessly, and even the newest member can begin to experience this great joy, for the reward of helping another sick person is unparalleled. Even though they may be tormented by many of their character defects, they will know and have the patience to work on us little by little, seeing how men and women go from darkness to light, knowing how they recover their finances, their families, and above all, the trust of the people they thought they would never regain, is an experience we have all shared. Of course, all of this depends on the individual's obedience to spiritual principles. Some who have been skeptical of this situation have had to experience this beautiful step to know that within AA, helping another sick person is the solution to many of our problems, because we free ourselves for a moment from the selfishness that has always characterized us as sick people. The essence of this 12th step is both outside and inside the group. Since the service of serving coffee or the domestic chores that have to be done within a group is an indirect way of helping our brother who is yet to arrive. Freely we have received, freely we must give, is the essence of this aspect of the 12th step. There are two aspects to the work of the 12th step, which is carrying the AA message. First, there's the individual who works diligently with a prospective member, dedicating time, money, and effort. But after a few months, the person relapses, leaving us feeling truly discouraged or as if we're simply not cut out to carry the message. The second case is the active member who gets caught up in a euphoria of helping others and begins giving advice that's beyond their capabilities and, far from helping, actually confuses the person even more. This type of person tends to be very possessive of newcomers, and if the prospective member seeks another sponsor, they will feel disillusioned. In both cases, these are simply growing pains that provide us with the experience to know ourselves better. At this point, we all ask ourselves countless questions that we have become accustomed to through habits and customs in our environment, such as family, work, our religion, if we practice one, our partner, and children. Can we have a joy in living? And the resounding answer is yes, because we know this from seeing those who insist on practicing the 12 steps of AA transform monotony, pain, and even calamity into something useful. And if these are the realities of life for the many alcoholics who have recovered in AA, they can become the realities of life for others. Although many times the sufferer doesn't try to follow all the steps completely, because when they begin to regain some confidence, their family begins to accept them. They stop drinking or using drugs, and the sufferer begins to rest on their laurels. They stop practicing the steps and settle only for abstaining from drugs. Sometimes they fall into the trap of the double step, which consists of passing on the message and quitting drinking. This way of life may be satisfying for a while, but very soon these people begin to fall back into a monotonous routine, and things happen for which they are unprepared, leaving them feeling depressed and helpless, such as the death of a loved one, emotional difficulties with family, financial hardship, or unemployment. Life itself begins to teach the addict a hard lesson, making them realize that simply quitting drinking or using drugs, going to the group for coffee, and smoking a cigarette is not enough. They will have to take action on the other steps. Since there are various circumstances in daily life that we can face if we practice all 12 steps and not just 2 or the steps that suit us, we must be prepared for both the best and the worst of life. In AA, we experience everything that a normal person experiences. That is to say, being in the group does not mean that we are exempt from experiencing painful situations as well as successes. Being in AA does not really deprive us of anything. It only gives us the necessary tools to continue on this journey called life. What we're trying to say is that true peace and tranquility will come from our constant spiritual development. When we prioritize any instinct, whether material, emotional, sexual, or societal, we're putting the cart before the horse. We often continue to believe that satisfying our instincts is happiness, but it's not that simple. Success often stems from maintaining a healthy spiritual life. Money, family, a partner, and even children aren't true happiness. We've always been accustomed to measuring spirituality by material possessions and external things like a house, a new car, children who are in school, or an exemplary family. But what we've always lost sight of is our own spirituality, which has ultimately led us back to ruin. As we grew spiritually, our perspective shifted. We realized that the demands we placed on others and ourselves were just as irrational as our drinking and drug use. We began to develop a tolerance for frustration, and the resentments we had harbored throughout our lives gradually faded away. We severed all our dependencies on other people, because today we know that our only dependence should be on a higher power and on the AA program. We have seen marriages in AA that have succeeded by following the AA program, as well as marriages that have dissolved due to years of irreparable damage. Our main problem is not how to stay married, but how to lead a happier married life by eliminating the serious emotional problems that often result from alcoholism. Marriages with severe problems are often those where the spouse has taken on the role of parent to the ailing partner, essentially treating them like a child in an adult's body, requiring them to solve all of the ailing partner's problems. This emotional turmoil leaves the spouse confused and unsure how to handle the situation. Initially, the spouse feels hurt because Alcoholics Anonymous, AA, has been able to accomplish what the spouse couldn't, helping the individual stop drinking. The ailing individual begins to dedicate more time to AA than to the family. However, this initial attitude is normal, as an unwell individual cannot be truly present with their partner or anywhere else. Over time, the spouse comes to understand that this is, for the time being, the best course of action for the individual's recovery. There is another different case where, in AA, there are single men and women in the groups who have married active members within AA. How are these marriages going? We can say that some have fared well as long as they have had some experience within the 12 steps and are committed to the AA program, since having the group in common makes these types of relationships fruitful. However, in cases of impulsive love or love at first sight, they often fail because what they have created is a false illusion, since they have not transcended the emotional disorders that the other person has. Many of them return to drinking, and one of the two ends up leaving the group, if not both. That is why a decision of this nature should be monitored with sponsorship, since our self-sufficiency will cause us to fail again. Another different case is that of someone who has experienced a divorce or does not have a healthy family life. These individuals feel desolate and isolated. However, AA members embrace this individual, and before the person knows it, these feelings fade away. They can even take on responsibilities within a group that a married person could not because of the time commitment involved in AA service. There is a perverse situation within this issue which stems from those who call themselves godfathers or group leaders who abuse the women who come to attend the group. They sponsor and help women solely to satisfy their carnal desires, although we don't intend to demonize the act itself, as it said that a man only goes as far as a woman allows. We have seen how these individuals face the consequences of their dishonesty and perversity. Let's remember that we are in a spiritual realm. Playing with and exploiting these spiritual principles is very dangerous. This has even led to many groups closing their doors, killing the faith of many beginners. These dishonest leaders who profit sexually or even materially from human weakness and the AA recovery program have only three possible outcomes: madness, spiritual death, and returning to alcohol or drug use. Regarding the financial aspect, during our active years we were wasteful and extravagant in our drinking and partying, since money was always seen as a way to gain power and prestige within society. Later, we went to the other extreme, where our finances ran out, and we became stingy and miserly with ourselves and our own families. We have even exhibited this attitude within our AA group. We continue to depend on money. That is, if we have money, we feel secure. If we don't, we feel worthless and fall into severe depressions. We soon realized that if we were doing better financially, we had to stop being wasteful and miserly. We had to reach a middle ground, seeking only economic stability and security. Money, instead of being our master, became our servant, which we shared with love with those around us. The true purpose of life is not the accumulation of money, as this belief only led us to have imaginary fears and anxieties. Fear of not having money, fear of poverty, or that what we had would end. The same medical studies on the personality of alcoholics determined that we alcoholics and addicts were infantile, with delusions of grandeur and emotionally hypersensitive. Because we always wanted to be number one in everything, we wanted to stand out even at the cost of hurting or harming the people around us. If we had to lie to society, we did it to avoid jeopardizing our reputation. This hurts many of the members within AA. They resent it when you make them see the truth of their reality, since it's not pleasant to contemplate that if we wanted to stand out or be first in everything, it was because deep down we were hiding the feeling of inferiority that we've had all our lives. The self-deception of our successes made us float above others. The false pride ultimately led us to be fearful of those we had lied to, and even more so of ourselves. We were afraid to know that what we thought and believed about ourselves wasn't reality. Today we know that leadership is about leading by example, and fortunately we realized that gaining fame or prestige within a completely sick society will bring us nothing good other than the fiction imposed on us by a society that always judges by appearances and not by the inner being of the human being. We confuse ambition with greed. The 12th step helps us see that appearances are not the true purpose of life, because in God's eyes, each of us is His child, and He loves us just as we are with our virtues and our flaws. By God's grace, many of us are still alive and have been given the opportunity to connect with an AA group. We may have discussed countless problems, but that's because many of us have overcome them and learned from our mistakes. Understanding is key to right attitudes, and right actions are key to a good life. Therefore, the joy of a good life is the theme of the 12th step of AA. We have come to understand that the darkest times are often just before dawn, and we will always have a prayer at hand that will give us the security and peace we need at any given moment. The Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Thank you for joining us on this spiritual journey toward recovery. If you have found value in our content and would like to continue exploring topics related to Alcoholics Anonymous and personal transformation, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to turn on notifications to receive alerts for our new videos. Together, we can build a community of support and hope. Until next time, and take care.